As an investor and former part-time partner at Y Combinator, the number one thing I look at when deciding whether to fund a startup is the team. No billion-dollar business has ever been built without fantastic founders, and in this video I'll walk you through everything you need to know about building world-class founding teams for high-growth technology companies. I'm Ryan Juni. I've started 5 technology companies, I sold one to Google, and 2 are now worth more than $250 million each. I've invested in and advised hundreds of companies, and now I'm bringing my hard-won lessons to YouTube to help entrepreneurs like you bring your greatest gifts to the world. This is the third video in my Quintessential Startup Playbook series, which includes everything I've learned about building venture-scale businesses. As usual, I've timestamped different sections of the video below in case you want to jump around. We're going to cover the ideal founding team, the co-founder question, finding great co-founders, splitting equity, defining roles and responsibilities, handling founder conflict, and employees and hiring. There's a fundamental question to ask when assembling your founding team. Why are you the best team to pull this off? How will you beat all the other teams who have the exact same idea as you right now? There's a framework to start answering this question. If you can fill this in, you'll understand both what to look for in co-founders and whether you need them. The 3 C's: coverage, complementary, and compatibility. Imagine a Venn diagram with a circle representing all the skills you need to make this startup successful. This could include domain expertise, technical skills, sales, deal-making, marketing, community building, finance, operations. The list goes on and will be specific to your startup. Now, imagine drawing a circle for each member of the founding team. Coverage means you have all the skills you need covered. If there are significant gaps, you should look to bring on advisors or have a clear plan to hire early employees. Most startup ideas change, sometimes a lot, so it's not super important to have your coverage exactly right. Your ideal co-founders will have a willingness and an ability to learn new skills quickly. Complementary means that there's not too much overlap or redundancy on the team. Each person brings distinct and complementary value. This makes it easier to assign responsibility and ownership as the company grows. I would also include diversity under this point. It's been shown that teams made up of people from diverse backgrounds and cultures often make better decisions. Lastly, and most importantly, compatibility means that the team shares a consistent vision and philosophy for the type of company they want to build. For example, is the primary objective to make money or to have impact? Do you want to build a multi-billion-dollar public company, a profitable lifestyle business, something you can flip quickly for $50 million in a few years? And what type of company culture do you want to build? Compatibility also includes understanding the different personality types of the founders and the preferred modes of conflict resolution, which I'll come back to later in this video. You can work through the first 2 C's with an open and honest, rational analysis of the team's skill set and experience. I've made a worksheet linked below to help you do that. Compatibility is harder to evaluate, and it's probably the most important factor. If you get it wrong, the other 2 won't matter. It's hard to assess compatibility without years of prior history working together. Here are some of the things you'll need to check for in a co-founder. How do they handle stress? How do they help you handle stress? How do they respond to conflict? Do you have the same goals for the company? For example, do you want to solve an important problem in the world, build something cool, or make a ton of money? Hopefully you can achieve all 3, but it's helpful to understand the primary underlying motivation of each of the founders. How does their risk tolerance compare to yours? Do they want the same culture and values in the company as you? Do you prefer secretive or open and transparent? Aggressive and challenging or friendly and nice? Can they both give and receive constructive criticism? Do they have high integrity? Are they open and honest with you? Are you open and honest with them? Do you enjoy hanging out with each other? A final note here on mixing friendship and business partnership. It can work, but you have to work really hard to maintain both. I've personally had friendships dissolve after starting a business partnership with someone, and I've seen it happen to many others. In some cases, you can still continue as business partners minus the friendship. I'll touch on this topic a little more in the founder conflict section of this video. In addition to the specific operational skills and domain expertise that you'll need to run your startup, I've included a list of the raw personal characteristics that successful founders tend to have in the worksheet, and here they are on screen. If you're up for a challenge, an interesting exercise is for you and your co-founders to rate yourselves against these characteristics and then rate each other. This will be a good test of your ability to have open and honest dialogue with each other, and maybe also practice some conflict resolution. By the way, if you're enjoying this series, you can really help me out by hitting the like button and subscribing to my channel. That will help the YouTube algorithm share my videos with more people that might find them useful. Now, let's move on to the question of if you should have co-founders. For the purpose of this video, I'm referring to a co-founder as someone who's been involved with the company from the beginning and owns at least 10% of the company's equity. While there are exceptions, this type of founder will be the focus for this video. Data from the world's most successful startup accelerator, Y Combinator, suggests that teams with 2 or 3 co-founders are the most likely to succeed. Sometimes 4 co-founders can work, but anything more than that is often difficult because of equity splits and leadership conflict. While there are single founder startups that have become very successful, like Amazon or ServiceNow, it's less common than startups with 2 or 3 founders for 3 simple reasons. The first one is obvious. Having co-founders improves productivity. You can simply get more done with more people. Although you can also get this benefit from hiring early employees, so this reason alone isn't a good argument for having co-founders. This leads to the second reason, payment. Employees rarely work for free in the early days, whereas with co-founders it's the norm. The third crucial benefit of co-founders is moral support. When you're the founder of a company, you are ultimately responsible for the success of that company. There's a level of responsibility you shoulder that employees will never feel. It can be a lonely path if you don't have a co-founder carrying that responsibility alongside you. Startups are an emotional roller coaster with fantastic highs and crushing lows. Having a co-founder to provide moral support during the bad times can be an invaluable company-saving asset. It's rare to get this level of support from employees since it's hard to be authentic and honest about your emotions with them, given that they're looking to you to lead and inspire them. You can and should, however, aspire to be open and vulnerable and sincere with your co-founders. None of this is to discourage you from being a solo founder. I just want you to know what you'll need to make it as one. You would need to have all the skills required to make progress alone, or be able to hire and fill in the gaps, which means you'll either need money or be good at convincing people to work for you for free, and have high enough conviction and passion for your idea that you'll be able to survive the tough times without the moral support of a co-founder. You'll likely need a strong support network outside the company. Before we move on, I want to note that if you don't have an obvious choice for a co-founder, don't just randomly pick someone so that you can say you have a co-founder. Having a bad co-founder is much worse than having no co-founder. We've discussed what makes great founders and if you need them. Now let's talk about where to find them. It's a huge risk to start a company with a co-founder that you don't know well. I've been burned doing this, and so have many entrepreneurs that I know. A good analogy is to think of it like getting married to someone you only just met. Sure, it could work, but the odds are against you. You'll spend a similar amount of time every day with your co-founder as you would with a spouse, and separating is just as complicated. So that means the best place to find co-founders is from your personal network. Think friends, colleagues, and acquaintances. Ideally, you'll have already worked on projects together. You know each other's working styles, and you have some history that binds you together. Start with people from school or work. Keep a list of people who are smart and impress you. And go and meet with these people, talk about your ideas, and if you're vibing, ask them if they'd consider starting a company with you. And if they say no, ask who the smartest people they know are that they would start a company with, and continue meeting people that way. Of course, you are now venturing into the realm of people you don't know well, so the risk factor increases. Along these lines, you can also attend meetups, both online and offline, that are organized around certain interest groups. There are programs designed specifically to help co-founders meet each other. For example, Y Combinator's Startup School has a co-founder matching program. If you're considering starting a company with someone you don't know well, I recommend doing a trial project together first. Calling it a project rather than a company is less formal and makes it more exploratory and fun. Set yourselves a deadline, like 3 months, and some goals for what you want to achieve, then go for it. At the end, you can have an honest conversation with each other about whether you'd like to continue working together and turn it into a real company. Another possibility is to start working on your idea by yourself. Build in public, attract attention to what you're working on, and some potential co-founders may appear. The final option, if you don't have the skills or conviction to get started on your own, is to wait to start a company until you find a good co-founder. You can use this time to build your skills, for example, by working at other startups or working on side projects in your spare time. One of the first big and difficult conversations you'll have with your co-founder is how to split ownership of the company amongst yourselves, also known as equity. Because this can be a hard conversation, many founders put it off or settle on the easy answer of an equal split. Now, in many cases, an equal split is the right answer, but deciding that without an honest conversation first is doing yourselves a disservice. This is an important moment to build relationship patterns for conflict resolution, which will be necessary for the founder relationship to survive. Frame it as an opportunity to grow your relationship and make it more anti-fragile. When discussing your equity split, it's common to focus on past contributions, like who came up with the idea or some part of the product that's maybe already been built. Now, while it's important to consider the past, it's a mistake to focus on it. The equity split should reflect the expected future contribution much more than past contributions. If you and your co-founders plan on working on this full time, dedicating all your energy and effort to the success of the company, and you have roughly equal complementary skills and experience, then the right answer is likely to split the equity equally. The key is not to do this without a thoughtful discussion about what you each plan on bringing to the company in the future. One way you can approach this discussion is to list out all the tasks and responsibilities that must be performed in order for the company to succeed, and assign these to different co-founders based on skills, experience, and willingness to learn. You can also include in the analysis anything the co-founders are bringing to the company that will help in the future, such as patented IP or an existing code base. It's not a perfect science, but you can use this as the basis to determine whether contributions will be of roughly equal value to the company. There's another analytical tool you can use when making any decision about equity, not only with co-founders, but also investors, employees, and advisors. It's the equity equation penned by YC founder Paul Graham. Use this equation when you're trying to decide whether giving up N% of equity in your company is a good idea. The answer is yes, if it will increase your company's value by more than 1 over 1 minus n. For example, should you give up 33% of the company in order to bring on a third co-founder? 1 over 1 minus n comes out to be 1.49. So if that additional co-founder makes your company at least 49% more valuable, for example by giving you a greater likelihood of succeeding, then it's a good idea. Of course, it's hard to predict the future, and reasonable people can disagree on how much value an additional founder, employee, or investor will truly create, but this at least gives you a framework to think about it. More important than these analytical approaches is a gut check. Will all founders feel happy and motivated to work as hard as possible towards the success of the business? If an equal split is the best way to create that scenario, then that's the right decision, assuming you've chosen good co-founders. Another way to find out is to ask yourself this question: what would you need from your co-founder for you to be happy giving them an equal split? Once you've agreed in principle on your equity split, it's important that you also agree on vesting. Put simply, founders should always vest their equity. If you're not familiar with the term, vesting means you earn your equity over time. If you were to leave the company before your equity is fully vested, you would only be entitled to a percentage of it, and the company would keep the rest. The most typical vesting structure for Silicon Valley venture scale startups is 4-year vesting with a 1-year cliff. This is the standard for everyone in the company, both employees and founders. This means if you leave the company within the first year, you get nothing. At your 1-year anniversary, you vest 25% of your equity, and thereafter you vest another 2.08% each month until 100% is vested after 4 years. If you left after 4 years, you would keep all of your equity. Although it's common for early investors to ask founders to revest a portion of their equity or make additional grants during the life of the company so that there is a continued incentive to stay. There are also many cases where founders have no 1-year cliff, so their equity starts vesting right away. So why should founders' equity vest? Basically, you're pre-negotiating what happens if things don't work out. I mentioned earlier that founder conflict and separation is common in the early stage of startups. You'll work to avoid it, but if it does happen, you'll want a plan to handle it. Vesting goes a long way towards solving this problem. Let's say you and a co-founder have equal equity and don't have vesting. If your co-founder decides to leave for whatever reason, he or she now owns half of the company and benefits exactly as you do from all the hard work you will be putting in over the next 5 to 10 years on your own. It's a huge dead weight on the cap table. Said another way, the reward for all the hard work you will be doing is immediately cut in half. Investors and founders all want to avoid this situation, so founders' equity should vest. All this talk of equity split and vesting is an awkward conversation for most founders, and you may resist doing it, but it only gets harder as time goes on. The easiest time to do it is as soon as possible. Another conversation that is potentially difficult for early stage founders is defining roles, and in particular, who will be CEO. This is another opportunity to build healthy relationship patterns for conflict resolution. An important reason to pick a CEO is that there will be times in the company's life that you can't get unanimous agreement from the founders, and someone has to make the final decision so that you can keep moving. Hierarchies are efficient and have been the standard form of management structure for hundreds of years for a reason. When speed is important, as it is in startups, making some decision and moving forward is better than being stuck in analysis paralysis. Having a clear leader who can make this call is better for everyone. Beyond that, while internally titles don't matter in an early stage company, they do sometimes matter externally. For example, when doing sales, other companies often want to talk to the CEO to feel special. And if you're raising money, investors will ask who the CEO is. So rather than delay it, I recommend having the conversation early. How should you pick? You can use the results of the exercise in the last section where you divided up all the tasks and responsibilities in the company. The responsibilities that typically fall on the CEO are things like setting the vision and motivating the team, recruiting, fundraising, and setting the standard of execution in the company by working the hardest and the longest. It's a tiring and often lonely job that requires taking on tremendous responsibility. Ask yourselves honestly, who would be best doing that? And who wants to do that? If you like sitting at your computer, designing beautiful products or architecting gorgeous code, and your co-founder prefers inspiring and motivating people, you should probably be CTO rather than CEO. To boil it down even more, a CEO needs to love doing sales. Selling to customers, selling to employees, selling to investors. If you love building and you don't like selling, CEO is not the job for you. If you do your best to have an open discussion about this, but can't come to an agreement and start talking about crazy ideas like being co-CEOs, you either haven't gone deep enough in practicing conflict resolution, or you aren't a good match as co-founders. It'll likely be better to go your separate ways now, rather than suffer for long years. Co-CEOs very rarely work out because of redundancy among responsibilities and, frankly, ego. It's an all too common story to hear of co-CEOs who both secretly think they're the better leader, with neither wanting to submit to the other as the ultimate decision maker. This leads to plenty of conflict, which only intensifies as pressure mounts and there's no clear leader in place. My recommendation is to have the hard conversation early rather than kicking the can down the road and paying for it later. Most startups fail in the early years due to founder conflict. Sam Altman, the former president of Y Combinator, had this to say: "Co-founder relationships are among the most important in the entire company. Everyone says you have to watch out for tension brewing among co-founders, and you have to address it immediately. That's all true, and certainly in YC's case, the number one cause of early death for startups is co-founder blowups." The key to healthy founder conflict is making sure you have small and healthy conflicts regularly. Think of it as cleaning out the pipes. If you let any conflict residue go unaddressed and build up over time, you can have a big and expensive explosion in the future. Garry Tan has a great video on this topic, which I'll link here. He talks about how his co-founder relationship broke down because they had too little conflict. I've been in this situation myself. 2 of my previous co-founder relationships soured because we avoided conflict and let things build up over time. Instead, we should have faced and resolved the conflicts earlier to keep the relationship clean and free of conflict residue. Tension in a co-founder relationship can come from many places. Startups are hard and the right decision is not always obvious, so disagreements are inevitable. One source of tension that was less obvious to me until someone explained it to me is the way in which we respond to stress. This is an oversimplification, but we can classify people's response as either anxious or avoidant. When anxious people are under stress, they like to rely on their close relationships for reassurance. They want to talk about their stress and share it with others. They want to keep talking and keep acting until the stress is resolved. They fear being left alone to deal with problems on their own. If others retreat, they will feel abandoned and become even more stressed. On the other hand, when avoidant people are under stress, they like to go into solitude to work through their problems on their own. They want to step back and take a breather and think. They find the constant distraction from others stressing and talking about the problem as interfering with their ability to think it through. They may even find it difficult to depend on others and would rather have the control and certainty that comes with working individually. If others come and share their stress, it can feel overwhelming and chaotic, creating even more stress. You might already see the problem here. The interaction between these stress responses can make problems worse. An anxious co-founder tries to relieve their stress by sharing their concerns. The avoidant co-founder will feel more stressed and retreat, causing the anxious co-founder to feel more stressed and thus want to share more, creating a vicious cycle. As always, the solution here is an open and honest conversation with each other about how you tend to respond to stress and how you can best support each other in those moments. I'll touch briefly on employees and hiring, but since this is more important for later stage companies, I'll come back to it in a future video. You should delay hiring as long as you can. Fewer people is better in the early stage of your company when you're searching for product market fit. Having a lot of employees is a vanity metric. Bigger teams aren't as nimble and responsive, which is what you need in the early days. Eventually, as the company grows and achieves product market fit, you will start hiring faster and ahead of the need. But in the beginning, you should only hire people when you desperately need to, and only after you've done that job yourselves as founders. This way, you'll know what to look for when hiring. Don't shy away from responsibility. Founders need to become experts at product, engineering, sales, customer support, operations, finance, and everything in between. You'll eventually hire specialists who are better than you at these roles, but it's a mistake to do this too soon. Remember, when Instagram was acquired by Facebook for $1 billion, it had 30 million people using the app and only 13 employees, including the 2 co-founders. And when WhatsApp was acquired by Facebook for $19 billion, it had 450 million people using the app and only 55 employees. Recruiting is hard and you will need to dedicate a lot of time to it. The best people have a lot of options and they are the ones that you want for your startup. When you're in recruiting mode, you'll need to make it your top priority. A bad early hire can kill the company. A players want to work with other A players. If you compromise and hire someone mediocre, you will regret it because once the standard of excellence goes down, it can be impossible to recover. You need to be either very good at hiring or very good at firing. What I mean is, you need to be extremely good at selecting the right people so that you rarely make a bad hire, which could require interviewing over 100 people for each position. Or, if you are more relaxed with your hiring criteria, you have to be very fast at identifying the bad hires and firing them quickly. Both hiring and firing are hard, but most founders find the emotional pain of firing people as the most unpleasant thing they ever have to do, so it's probably best to optimize around being good at hiring. Employees will get much less equity than founders, but it's actually common for employees to get higher salaries than founders because founders tend to pay themselves below market rates. It'll be hard to get good quality employees without paying them market rates. There's no simple formula for employee equity at the early stages. As a rule of thumb, expect to allocate up to 10% of the company to the first 10 hires. This will likely exponentially decrease with each new hire. Equity is a function of company size, stage, and the value of the employee. Employees who join earlier and those who are more experienced will get more equity than employees who join later or are more junior. You should pay fair compensation to your employees, or you'll have trouble retaining them after the initial excitement of joining wears off. The best employees have many other options, and if they feel they're undercompensated, they'll probably start looking at their options. I'll be making future videos on hiring and managing people because it is a huge topic. To get access to the resource pack attached to this video, click the link in the description. Thanks for watching this video on building startup teams. As a quick reminder, this is actually the third video in my Quintessential Startup Playbook series. To learn more about finding billion-dollar ideas and all I've learned about building startups, click here. Please write your feedback and questions in the comments, and I'll do my best to get back to each of you. The next video in the series will be about market and competitive landscape analysis, and I'll link to it here once published. You'll find more videos on business, purpose, leadership, and living your deepest life on my channel. And until next time, my friends, go deep.